Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Indie Alaska is a groundbreaking series that dives into the lives of people living in the last frontier. Each episode introduces you to colorful characters from around the state. Funding for Indie Alaska is provided in part by Alyeska Pipeline Service Company. Catch the latest episodes at alaskapublic.org.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for tonight's show. Had some pretty strong winds out west today, western part of the state. St. Paul out in the southeast Bering Sea reported gusts this afternoon to 68 miles per hour. And then up to the north, Kotzebue, east winds to 64 miles per hour. That resulted in blizzard there for the Selawik Valley and Baldwin Peninsula. And then down to the south and the north coast of the Yukon Delta, Cape Romanzoff, 63 miles per hour. And then farther to the south there near Kuskokwim Bay or toward Kuskokwim Bay, Kipnuk, 56 miles per hour. And on the advisory and warning map here, let's start with the blizzard warning out again for the Selawik Valley, Baldwin Peninsula area there due to visibilities in that blowing snow. Those strong winds reduced to near zero at times. That's out for another hour or so, then due to expire. And then we've got the coastal flood warnings out for the Yukon Delta coast here, eastern Norton Sound, and the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula. That's out for tonight and through tomorrow, and tomorrow night actually. And then the coastal or the high surf advisory out here for the Yukon Delta or the Kuskokwim Delta coast and Nunivak Island for heavy surf and possible minor beach erosion. And then to the west here, these are all winter weather advisories there from the Kobuk, Noatak Valley areas down across Galena to the northern Kuskokwim Valley for 4 to 8 inches of snow total accumulation here with this storm for tonight and into tomorrow. Heavy snow all afternoon at McGrath going on, and that beginning to spread into the Susitna Valley with Squintna currently down to a mile in snow, and light snow making its way into northern Cook Inlet, Kenai, or Anchorage on down to Kenai. There's a winter storm warning out for heavy snow for the Susitna Valley tonight, mostly this evening as the front moves through, looking for 4 to 8 inches of snow there, and high wind warnings here for the Alaska Range passes west of the Tok Cutoff. Looking for winds, southerly wind gusts tonight up to 70 miles an hour near the passes there all through this area. And then lastly, winter weather advisory for Palmer, Anchorage, and Wasilla for 4 to 8 inches or 3 to 8 inches of snow tonight, again with the heaviest amounts moving through this evening. On the satellite imagery, pretty good here. Some isolated showers, but a lot drier over the southeast coast, fair over the east, and then the big storm out here over the northern Bering Sea, kind of tracking northeastward there towards St. Lawrence Island. The front here right across, looks like it's right near Deering or Buckland, and southward here at picture time into roughly Bristol Bay in that area, and then kind of cuts back or jogs over to the west here with clouds initially, but getting some light snow late this afternoon reported at Seward, and of course rain at Iliamna. Milder air back to the west here in that south flow actually through this area with rain showers over Bristol Bay, but that flow moving quite rapidly. Strong southwest jet is evidenced by this higher cloud deck streaming northeastward. It's going to push that front through quite rapidly tonight across southern Alaska and kind of pivot around, rotate up to the northwest. But the leading edge of the first batch of cold air by this enhanced area of cumulus from just east of St. Lawrence Island down along the Yukon Delta coast, back across the Pribilofs there on out towards Shemya, and then much colder air to the northwest of that cloud feature. But that's all coming westward here, already coming onto the southwest coast, break here over Bristol Bay and up into the southwest interior areas. And again, pretty nice day here over the southeast coast, but the clouds already beginning to stream, the higher clouds, into the North Gulf Coast areas there. And back, or looking at today's chart, again, the front roughly right through this area at about 3 p.m. this afternoon, with rain down to the south. Not a whole lot of rain reaching Kodiak Island, but moisture now coming up to the southern Kenai Peninsula, and already snow spreading into the Susitna Valley and Cook Inlet areas, and extending back to the northwest there, becoming kind of mixed here behind the front with those good southerly winds, pulling that warmer air all the way up across the Seward Peninsula areas, but now starting to circulate back in and around. Really unstable air with that. Some isolated thunderstorms around the Pribilof Islands today. A lot of showers extending back to the west toward Shemya. And then again, these winds beginning to increase here across the western and central Alaska Range areas. For tonight, again, that front blows by pretty quickly here across south central Alaska, moving through this evening with the heaviest snow areas, but kind of lingering a little longer up this valley there and then into the Tanana Valley, areas of snow along this frontal boundary right back to the western Arctic coastal areas, and rain, possibly heavy at times, shifting into the North Gulf Coast, into Yakutat, spreading into the northern panhandle. Otherwise, got a lot of snow showers coming into Bristol Bay. Westerly winds continue here, pulling that cold air, or actually the low center, slow moving low center, and the tight gradient behind that. It's driving down a lot of Arctic air out of the Russian Far East and dumping it right into the Bering Sea. So numerous snow showers and gusty winds. Still looking at the gale force winds. Here are actually storm warnings for the northern Bering Sea into the southwest coast. Very windy conditions coming back into the Norton Sound area, and the staying pretty breezy, even though the blizzard warning due to end here over the northwest interior areas. And taking a look at tomorrow, that front pushes eastward right into the southeast coast with rain all through that area there. Rain and snow showers, scattered snow showers over the Copper River Basin, the eastern interior, and this low center tracking, well, right toward Tiller there, the center roughly, weakening to about 966 millibars, but still some good northwest winds turning westerly across the northern Bering Sea and then southwest. Numerous showers and areas of snow all through this area here, right up to the Koyukuk Valley. It looks like northern Koyukuk Valley, and then westward along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range on out toward Kotzebue. The main front pushing a narrow band of light snow across the north slope and on out to the Arctic coast. Otherwise, a couple of troughs out here, rain and snow showers as the freezing levels drop out here south of the Alaska Peninsula, and a lot of snow showers out over the Bering Sea, and then to a lesser extent over the Aleutians. Outlook for Tuesday, another big storm appears here and moves northward into the central Aleutians, and that'll have some strong gales and storm force winds with it, especially on the back side of that system. Otherwise, snow showers continue here, quite a almost solid area of that with the colder air in over the warmer Bering Sea waters, and that'll extend right down into Bristol Bay, northward across the Aleutian Range and along the Alaska Range there. And then some more snow showers move into south central Alaska, Kenai Peninsula, northern Cook Inlet areas, and even the Susitna Valley, and a lot of numerous snow shower conditions, but this low weakening, winds lighter now up over the northwest interior and back out toward the Bering Strait areas, and looks relatively dry here for the eastern Arctic coast down across the upper Yukon Valley, and actually down into the Copper River Basin. And then a lot of westerly flow, good westerly flow here. So rain showers down over the southern panhandle, snow showers up over the northern areas, especially up the Klondike Highway toward the passes. And a lot more shower activity will be rolling in there for Tuesday night and into Wednesday. Temperatures down that way today in the mid to upper 40s there, with 42 at Juneau, 45 at Sitka. And let's see, that was Klawock with 45 degrees. Yakutat had 42. 30s North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. 29 in Anchorage, 43 down at Homer. Same thing at Kodiak, just 18 degrees there at Talkeetna. 14 over at Gulkana. Lower to mid 20s here for the Tanana Valley. 21 at Northway. Colder up toward Fort Yukon with 12 degrees. Just 5 there at Arctic Village and over at Kaktovik. 2 degrees at Umiat. And single numbers there along the Arctic coast, but warming up here to the 20s there toward Point Hope, 20s to mid-30s here over the northwest. Same thing for the Seward Peninsula. Pretty much above freezing temperatures across the southwest interior. And for Bristol Bay, lower 40s, lower to mid-40s for the peninsula. 30s out here over the Pueblos, mid-30s this afternoon, 36 at St. Paul, and lower 40s for the Adak and Atka area. Lows tonight, a little below zero up there at Arctic Village, otherwise single numbers all the way down in toward Tok and Northway, eastern Arctic coast, but you can see quite a contrast here from northeast to southwest with lower 30s here over the southwest to mid to upper 30s over the Aleutians and the Alaska Peninsula. Highs for tomorrow, teens, eastern Arctic coast, single numbers there around Arctic Village, eastern Brooks Range. 30s south central Alaska, 40s for the Panhandle, 30s out to the southwest, and still looking at temperatures possibly as high as the mid-30s tomorrow for the Seward Peninsula areas, and lower 40s to the peninsula. Flying weather, quite an area IFR here from Kuskokwim Bay northward there, up over the western interior valley areas, and then along the Koyukuk Valley up to the southern slopes of the Brooks Range there. IFR western Arctic coast and the Chukchi Sea down to near St. Lawrence Island. A lot of marginal VFR out over the Bering Sea, kind of in bands here, Bristol Bay down along the peninsula and then back out to the northwest. And then IFR into the northern Panhandle, another batch down to the south. Passes Anatuvik, marginal VFR, but VFR to the north, and that same forecast good for Adigan. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal becoming VFR for rainy. Windy IFR, gradual improvement throughout the day. Same thing for Isabel and Mentasta, starting at IFR and then getting better. Tanita IFR becoming VFR in the afternoon. Portage marginal VFR, but the eastern entrance could be VFR for the entire day. Chilkoot and White IFR. Freezing levels here, 2 to 6,000 feet here over the eastern Gulf of Alaska there. Ahead of that front, that's for late tonight. Again, this whole pattern moving quite rapidly. And by tomorrow afternoon, this whole thermal ridge axis will be shifted into the Panhandle. Otherwise, 2,000 feet well south of the Aleutians now to just south of Kodiak Island. Again, that's late tonight, early tomorrow morning, and the surface farther to the north. Icing threats, heaviest will be here over the southeast coast below about 12,000 feet, mostly of the rime variety, and icing light to isolated moderate here, possible here for the North Gulf Coast areas, and back along Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula, then another area out here from the Kobuk Valley all the way down to Nunivak Island and then back across the northern Bering Sea. Winds aloft showing northwest jet here, the big upper level trough centered near the Bering Strait, but this whole area through here generally cyclonic flow with the jet stream 150 knots across the central Aleutians down to the south, back into the Panhandle there at about 90 knots coming over the top of that ridge. 9,000 feet, strong north to northwest winds 45 to 55 knots here out over the northern and southeast Bering Sea, swinging around to the south 35 to 55 knots over the western interior, southwest 20 to 25 over the west, and the Panhandle southwest 40. Not quite so strong at 3,000 feet, but still southwesterly there, pushing that front eastward. And 50 to 45 knots here over the Bering Sea, and good south flow on the west side of that low, still in the 40 to 50 knot range through this area, lighter to the east. Taking a look at turbulence, again in the turquoise area, that's occasional widespread moderate, below about 4,000 to 7,000 feet here from the northwest interior, all along the west coast down into Bristol Bay, and then along the Alaska Peninsula and eastern and central Aleutian areas there. And also some light to isolated moderate chop over the southeast coast with that front moving through. And after the break, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
So let's start here. First of all, how do you know how your plane is supposed to perform? How long it's going to take to get airborne? How far to clear that tree at the end of the runway that just happens to be exactly 50 feet tall? How do you know if it can clear that mountain that rises just past it? That's right, the POH, Pilot's Operating Handbook. Here are all the charts and graphs that let us calculate how the airplane is going to perform under specific conditions. The POH gives us all the numbers we need, right? Well, hang on a second. How do they get these numbers? Here's where they come from. The airplane manufacturer. And here's the airplane. Look at it. The paint's so glossy it looks like it's wet. The tires are perfectly inflated. Everything's lubed and brand new. The engine develops full compression. The rigging is correct. And here's the pilot, a meticulous professional who knows the airplane, knows all the physics of flight and all the tricks for getting max performance. A pilot who puts them into practice in the air every working day. That's the plane and the pilot behind the numbers, like a jockey on a thoroughbred. Now, of course, manufacturers want their performance numbers to look as good as possible, but they don't go for the absolute edges of the envelope in developing their figures. The fact is, the plane may perform better than the book indicates under certain conditions, because no heroic effort has gone into getting the absolute shortest landing distance or takeoff roll. The test pilot isn't dragging the plane in at the back end of the power curve and dropping it in on the runway to come up with the landing distance. The aircraft are operated normally. So, if they're operating the aircraft normally and we're operating the aircraft normally, why shouldn't we expect to duplicate the book performance figures? Let's start here, on the flight line. If these planes look like they're tired, they probably are. Look at those tires. If they're not properly inflated, it's going to cost you performance, not to mention jeopardize safety by increasing the chance of a blown tire. How old is your engine? Think it's developing as much power as it did when it was fresh? And what about all that extra weight that accumulates in the baggage compartment over the years? Bottom line, if it's not a new airplane, it's not going to perform like one.
Clear prop.
And here's the other half of the equation separating our performance from book performance. It's us. We aren't professional test pilots, and we can't fly as well. No big surprise there. Most of us haven't been trained that way, and we don't fly as much. Most public use airports have adequate margins of safety built into the airport design in terms of runway length and obstructions. But at some point, pilot sloppiness, plane limitations, and environmental conditions can combine in bad ways. Then you have dinged props, bent metal, or worse. So the bottom line, when you use the POH numbers to determine takeoff and landing performance, add a safety margin to the distances. The Air Safety Foundation recommends adding 50% of the book takeoff and landing distance to estimate how much runway you'll need. Here's an important statistic. There are about 50% more landing accidents than takeoff accidents. But takeoff accidents are more than 4 times as likely to result in fatalities. Takeoff combines high power and slow speed, a recipe for disaster if the aircraft is allowed to stall or control is lost. Pilots must be aware that power loss is a possibility on every takeoff. If the engine quits on a single-engine airplane, the pilot must quickly transition to a glide, maintain control, and fly the airplane all the way to the ground. An engine failure on a multi-engine airplane requires the pilot to maintain control, determine if a climb and return to the airport is possible, and if not, land the airplane off airport. In some ways, takeoffs are the most demanding operations for a general aviation pilot. Think about it. How long has it been since you last flew? Takeoff is one of the highest workload phases of flight. Checklists, ATC clearance, taxi instructions, aircraft configuration, and then the takeoff, managing power, airspeed, course, and attitude, while dealing with sometimes hostile atmospheric conditions, collision avoidance, and ATC instructions. And we may not have had our hands on an airplane in weeks. This is certainly one factor behind many takeoff accidents. Pilots can set themselves up for takeoff accidents before they even get to the runway. Improper configuration is another common factor cited in accident reports. Make sure flaps are set properly and the trim is adjusted correctly. If either is set incorrectly, you'll have a less than book performance takeoff, or worse. You're cleared to taxi into position and hold. Wait a second. Have you visually cleared the area? Even at towered airports, you need to check. Pilots have died from failing to follow this simple rule. Look for planes on short final and others that may have taken the active at intersections ahead of you or behind you. While we're on the subject of intersections, unless there is much more runway than you'll need, ASF recommends against intersection takeoffs. Remember, as a taxpayer, you're entitled to use all the runway. In the event of an emergency, that extra 1,000 or 2,000 feet could make the difference between a non-event and an accident. Okay, you've been cleared for departure. This is the germinating point for the #1 cause of takeoff accidents: loss of control. Loss of control accounts for almost 1/3 of these mishaps. This is what sends airplanes off the side of the runway. The rudder is the most critical element in maintaining directional control. Maybe you've got 2 left feet on the dance floor, but you'll need to know how to dance on the rudder pedals. Some pilots have never been taught, and others have forgotten. Of course, the ailerons have to be positioned relative to the wind, but there's not even a breeze today, remember? If you have a steerable nose or tail wheel, it's best to stay off the brakes until you need them to slow down. If you ride too high on the pedals, you may get braking action when you don't need it. That can result in lengthening the takeoff roll or destroying a tire on landing. Right rudder counteracts the torque, P-factor, and slipstream effect that together tend to yaw the airplane to the left during takeoff and climb. Unless you're flying a twin with counter-rotating props, you'll need a strong but sensitive right foot on takeoff to keep the airplane going straight. Keep your eyes outside the airplane. We'll never know how many of those loss of control accidents resulted from the pilot being distracted and focusing on something inside the cockpit. Where should you be looking? Not at the center line. You should be looking past the end of the runway to a reference point, a line of trees, say, or whatever's beyond the end of the runway you can aim for. How do you know when to rotate? Again, you'll find the numbers in your POH, but that's not the final answer. First of all, you shouldn't be staring at your airspeed indicator, waiting for a magic number to haul back on the yoke. You have to have a feel for the rotation speed. This is the art of flying. The airspeed indicator will give you a rough idea when you're reaching it. Your airplane will communicate more precisely, but you have to be attuned to get the message. It will feel light and ready to fly. At rotation speed, just enough back pressure is applied to let the plane fly itself off the runway. Some pilots try to peel the airplane off the ground with excessive and premature back pressure. This increases drag, lengthens the takeoff roll, and may result in a stall. Some leave it on the runway too long. This leads to jarring takeoff rolls, nose wheel shimmy, and worn tires. What's the proper pitch for climb out? Between 5 and 10 degrees off the horizon will yield a healthy, positive rate. That's between the first and second horizontal bar over the horizon on the attitude indicator, but your main reference is outside. You should have a mental picture of where that puts the cowl of your aircraft relative to the horizon.
South to southeast winds 30 to 35 knots here over the inside waters, and southwest, or mostly southwest, 30 to 35 knots here along the coast. And for Tuesday, winds westerly here 20 to 30 knots. Again, strongest on the south coast, westerlies for Clarence Strait at 25 knots, otherwise much lighter, and southerly here for the central and northern inner channels. For Cook Inlet, southwest 20 to 25 knots here, strongest south of the Forelands, and that pattern extends all the way down to Shelikof Strait. And then we've got small craft advisories here from the east side of Kodiak Island all the way along the North Gulf Coast. And for Tuesday, for Prince William Sound, winds become light and variable, seas 2 feet or less. Northern Cook Inlet, light west winds. Small craft advisories though for the southern inlet, and even higher small crafts here for Kamishak Bay and Shelikof Strait. Westerly gales there for the east side of Kodiak Island, excuse me, and westerly winds 25 to 30 knots there for the Barren Islands, North Gulf Coast. Seas running about 8 to 12 feet, but up to 16 feet there for Kodiak Island. And for the Alaska Peninsula, again, gales here on the north side of the peninsula. Small craft advisories, pretty brisk winds at 30 knots there from Sitkinak all the way over to Cape Sarachev with 14 to 16 foot seas. And for Tuesday, west winds 40 knots here for the north side of the peninsula, right into Bristol Bay with seas 16 to 20 feet in those areas. Minimum gales here from Sitkinak down along the south side of the peninsula. And for the eastern Aleutians tomorrow, west winds 30 to 35 knots with gales extending out here to the central Aleutians, actually the west central Aleutians, and dropping off a little bit towards Shemya. And then for Tuesday, we've got that big storm coming in somewhere around the central Aleutians. So on the backside of that, north to northwest, 40 to 50 knots, and then strong gales here for Adak and Atka up across the areas west of Nikolsky. minimum gales developing there across the eastern Aleutians. And for the southwest coast, west 50 tomorrow, north of Nunivak Island. Actually, the 50-knot winds tonight will be out over St. Matthew Island, and then those turn northwest 45 for tomorrow, west 35 for the Pribilofs. And for Tuesday, northwest 35 knots, and even stronger there from the west, south of Nunivak Island, right into Kuskokwim Bay, westerly gales for the Pribilofs. And up along the Arctic coast, brisk wind advisories here from the central coast all the way over to Demarcation Point for those 25-knot easterlies, and small craft advisories here, western Arctic coast, all the way down to Cape Thompson. Then we've got gales there south of that for 35-knot winds, heavy freezing spray as well. And then for Tuesday from Wales to Cape Thompson, north 35 knots, small craft advisories also here from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, and lighter winds diminish here down to 20 knots, but still heavy freezing spray all through these areas to the west. Much lighter winds for the north coast, north 15, and then west-southwest breezes, or barely a breeze at about 10 knots for the east side. And for tonight, again, that snow, we've got a heavy snow warning out for the Susitna Valley, but this front's going to push through quite rapidly and spread rain to the eastern Gulf Coast. A lot of wind, snow showers, and snow back here to the west with, again, storm warnings here over the northern Bering Sea. And then for tomorrow, stays pretty unsettled, still windy here from the Kobuk Valley down into the Yukon Delta. A lot of snow showers across all of the Bering Sea. This front pushes wind and rain into the Panhandle, scattered snow showers over the southeast interior. And then for Tuesday, that front is into western Canada, followed by showers here of rain or snow into the Panhandle, with the snow mostly up to the north. More snow showers south central Alaska in the Susitna Valley, and another batch here from the Kuskokwim Valley along the Alaska Range into Bristol Bay. Have a great...
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.